All right, so I've shown you the pencil tool and how you can lock your sketch layer underneath and how you can develop individual kind of black cutouts using the pencil tool, setting it at different smoothnesses. And these are what are called filled paths, and they have no outline. Okay, but let me show you some other ways that you can approach your logo design. This is the approach that's going to work best for mine, but mine doesn't have any really symmetrical shapes to it. So I want to start a file, and I would suggest you do as well. That's my Illustrator playground. So I'm going to call it Carl Illustrator Playground, because it is a wonderful tool, and you want to kind of know some of the differences of it. You want to make sure your profile is a print profile. That will give you your full coloring options. And a letter size is a good default size. The sizes are not pixel based. They are based on the media. So this is for a letter size printout. But this is just called the artboard, and it really doesn't matter at all because our vectors are infinitely scalable. Okay, so I'm on layer 1 here. I'm not going to work on top of a sketch. Instead, I'm going to draw with the pencil tool. And I'm going to just use the default settings that are here, which is a white fill with a black outline. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to draw a self-portrait. So first, let's start with my head. I got messy hair. I got ears. I've got a chin. Got my other ear. Okay, and you'll see just as I'm using the pencil tool, as I'm close to the edge of finishing my shape, it's going to want to link up and close the path. And I want to look for that. If I ever want to force it to close a path, so now I'm going to make my neck. So there's my neck. And I'm a long ways from where I started, but I want to force it to close the path. I can hold down Option. Well, that used to work. Let's see. New versions change. I don't know if there's a way you can force it to close the path. You just have to get close enough that you get that circle now. Okay, so for my neck, though, I'm going to draw a path that's open because I don't want to connect it, right? I don't want it to go through my chin. So how do I do that? Well, I have to draw it without touching my existing path. Or I can select off of my existing path by holding down Command to shift it to the large selection tool and clicking off of it. And then just give it a little bit of space so you're not touching your existing path, and draw a neck. Okay? And then you see it creates a new line. But the difference is this path is closed, completely contained, whereas this path is open. So what's the difference? Right now there are both stroke paths, which means they only have an outline. And the benefit of that is I can adjust that stroke outline. So if I hold down Shift and Command and select both of them, I'll have all of them selected. And then I can say I want that stroke to be just like a font. I want it to be 11 point or 12 point. More than that, I can say I want it to be variable. You know, go from thin to thick. If I click off of it, you'll see what that looks like. Or I can make it try to simulate pressure just by starting thin, going thick, going thin again, then going thick again. But it's something that's laid over. It has nothing to do with the pin pressure I used. Or I can make it very one-sided. You know. So I tend to like to play with the variable and then play with different stroke weights. But the reason I don't use strokes much in my logo design, and this is just my own preference, is that stroke weight affects what things look like. So if you look at the edges here, like this, that doesn't exist when I'm at a lower. That stroke weight doesn't exist when I'm at a lower point value. It's just as I add more of a stroke, it's going to get a longer and longer point there. And I don't like that. And it's not something I can erase either, because it's a stroke, not a fill. But strokes, you can also do some more interesting things, like putting an oval on it instead of a circle, so that the path itself looks more calligraphic. See how it goes thick to thin? Even though it's a uniform stroke here, it's done with a 5-point oval, so it has a little bit more drama to it. You can try it with a flat, so it's like a pinstriping brush, a 3-point oval. You can set your own oval size by double-clicking and adjusting it this way. You can also even use what's called a sketchy. It's kind of oxymoronic, but a sketchy vector, which will make it look like sketchy charcoal or pencil, but it's still vector strokes, just broken up kind of randomly. Again, not that useful, I think, for logo design, but good to know, depending on what you're doing. Now, in order to apply any of these options to the stroke, it has to be selected. And how you select in Illustrator is either with the large selection tool or the small selection tool. When you want to select a whole path or multiple paths, you use the large selection tool. When you want to select individual anchor points, you use the small selection tool. So to find an anchor point to select it, that allows me to then push it out if I want to make my hair even messier. Right? And I can even use that small selection tool to adjust those Bezier handles that Marco talked about that adjust the curves. So I can affect my shapes. Okay. So once you have a path, especially a closed path, there's lots you can do to modify it using your selections, using your strokes. But what if I don't want strokes at all? What if I want them to be filled? Well, this is the difference between a closed path and an open path. So I'm going to select this one first. I'm going to set it to just uniform. Let's do a 5-point round. Or I'll even just do basic. So it'll be the whatever strength I put here. So 5-point stroke there. Notice that a 5-point round doesn't give me that sharp angle at the edge. It will round it out. So that's helpful to know if you do want to use stroke. Okay, and if I want to fill this in, I can just double click in my fill, pick a color. I can pick kind of a skin tone, fill it in. I can modify that if that feels too dark or too red or too orange. I can always change that selection. Now if I do that for my open stroke and I fill it, let's fill it with a slightly darker color because it's my neck. That's what it's going to do. It's going to close the path for me. But that's not really a problem if I put one layer in front of the other. So layers here are just an organizational tool for us. Whenever you make a new path in Illustrator, it automatically creates a new path within your layer. And that allows you to select it and move it above. And the ordering of paths matters a lot. Another way to select individual paths instead of using the large selection tool is to just use the little dots next to them. So if I wanted to set this back to being a 5-point round, I could do that. All right, so let's get to some of these tools that can create really cool strokes. The brush tool. The brush tool, if you double click it, you can set whether it's more accurate or more smooth, just like the pencil tool. You can also set it to fill. And then it will fill as it goes, like that. But generally you don't want that on because you use it to create strokes. That's what brush is for. I also have it clicked to edit selected paths, so I can redraw it as long as it's selected first. I didn't select it first, so let me do that. Command X, get back. Hold down Command to get to the selection tool, select it first, and now I can redraw it as long as I start and stop on the same path. Okay, and I'm going to turn that fill off. Okay, so now I have the stroke set so it's not filling as it goes. Let's set it to be more than a 5-point round. Let's set it to be an oval, and let's set it to be, let's say an 8-point oval by just increasing its size, right? And now, where it says roundness, I can set it to be pressure sensitive. And if I'm using a stylus, that'll be really nice. And size, I could set to be pressure sensitive with a variation of the full 8 points. So that means if I press lightly, I'll get very little. If I press hard, I'll get a lot more. And yet it's all still a stroke. So if I select it, it's not showing me the outside of both lines, it's just showing me the inside line. So, lots of options. So let's draw a face now. I want to make sure I'm above this layer, so I'll create a new layer and I'll lock the one underneath. And I'll use my brush and I'll paint some eyebrows. These are all strokes. Some upper eyelids, some pupils, and I'll go ahead and contain them. But if I push a little too hard, I don't get to erase it away because it's a stroke, not a fill. My lower eyelid. My nose. Getting a little bit thicker at the bottom there. My other nostril. My lips. Try to be really light with the, a little bit heavier on the bottom lip. So this is my playground. This is where I can try these things out. My hair. This might be where strokes are useful in creating kind of visual texture, especially when you vary the pressure. You can create some nice effects that way. And I can change my outline a little bit. The inside of my ear. And this is just all using strokes. The only fills I did were these flat colors behind. I'm looking too young, so let me give me some wrinkles. I don't have that strong a chin. Let me give me a double chin. Right? Now the great benefit of using Illustrator is at any time, as long as the layer is unlocked, I can go back to any of these and change their attributes. I can change the fill. If I wanted the fill to perfectly match something I already had, instead of trying to select the color, I can use the dropper tool and just click on the one I want it to match. And it will change the stroke and the fill to match. So that's also very helpful. So if I wanted this to have this kind of stroke, I just use the dropper tool and voila. Okay, so that's all with strokes. Here's where strokes can cause a problem. What if I want to select it all and then shrink it so I can fit more in? So the fill is scalable, but strokes are not. Remember, these strokes are set to a certain point size. And so that point size will not change unless I go individually and change them each. So the weight is the same. Oops, let's see. So if I redo that, you'll see how that weight stays the same even though the space is different. That will not happen with paths. And that's my big problem with strokes. Undo scale. All right. What else can I show you? The shape tools are just like they were in Photoshop when you used them. And they have their advantages. I can build it. I can give it its own attributes. Maybe you guys didn't notice the pale pink star tattoo I have on my right cheek. I can turn off the stroke if I want. So it's just a very subtle outline. And now because it's a fill, that will scale just fine. I can add other attributes to it as well, like gradients.